Hello, welcome again to Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. And I'm doing a series of videos today. They may all be released sometime this week on our August Knit-a-Long, which is Lavanya Patricella's Brioche Bandana Cowl. Now, my example is the bulky version, the original, and then she has a DK version and she has a fingering version. They are separate patterns. And this is in no way meant to replace the pattern. I'm not going to talk about stitch numbers. There's a lot of things that I'm going to rely on you working with the pattern on. This is just to help you understand what the pattern is telling you to do and help you master brioche. I do love this pattern because it starts in the round where each color gets one task, brioche knitting or brioche purling. And then once you get the hang of that, we get to transition to doing it flat to make the V, the bandana part of it, where then depending on the side you're on, each color has a different task and it switches side to side. So as we go, I will be going over some of the tips and tricks that help me keep track of brioche, and hopefully they'll help you too. The last video was just to get a setup going where we can understand the rhythm when you're doing brioche is to have a single stitch of one color and a stitch of the other color and its wrap on every row, and it shifts every row. So now that we have it set up correctly, it is time to do the second pass of this round, because the other thing is you've only finished a row or a round when each color has done something on that row, and you only work one color at a time. While that might sound confusing, only having to hold one color at a time simplifies the process. So in the last video, we set up adding in the second color and setting up the brioche with a knit row. It's not fully a brioche knit row, that's going to happen in the next video, but it's time to do a brioche purl row, and that is going to be done with my brick color. So let's get to it. So the end of the last video, I said to leave your yarn that is color B, which is my green here, in front, and color B was doing the knitting. It doesn't show up prominently yet because we have our setup rows. But now I need to find color A, which is in the back here. I recommend getting in the habit of whenever you're finishing a row, you leave the yarn in front. Didn't do it on my setup row, but I'm gonna try to do that from here on out. So we move our marker to mark the beginning of the row and bring our color A in front. Now the instructions talk about a BRP. That is the abbreviation for a brioche purl. And a brioche purl is taking a stitch and its wrap and purling them together. It might feel like purling two things together, but just know that a stitch and its wrap count as one thing. So that I just did my brioche purl, and it's BRP SL1YO. Remember, a slip one, here's my slip one, the yarn should be in front. Now on a purl row, I find it's a lot easier because the yarn is already in front. So I'm going to slip my stitch and I'm going to bring my yarn over. And this time, whenever you do a yarn over, you want to get your yarn where it needs to be to do your next stitch. On the last row, to knit, the yarn needed to be in back, so you bring your yarn over and you stay there. Here, the yarn, we need to do a purl stitch again next, a brioche purl. That's going to be our repeat. So the yarn's in front, I've slipped my stitch. The yarn over is going to go all the way around. And this should look a lot like the slip stitch and the yarn over from our last row. We just were in a different position and need to end up in a different position to do our next thing. But this is going to look like the previous row, except the colors are reversed because I'm using my rust color is going to be my working yarn on this row. So again, I have a stitch and its wrap. And the wrap, if you look at it and twist around, the wrap is slanted. It's at a diagonal and it wraps around the stitch, which should match the color of the yarn that you're using. The single stitches should be straight up and down. These are both single stitches. This one I worked last time, this one I slipped. So brioche purl is a stitch and its wrap, and they're going to be two different colors. And I'm going to purl them together. Move my yarn up here. A slip one yarn over. Make sure your yarn's in front, which it is on this row. Slip one, yarn over is wrapping it all the way around. Brioche purl. Stitch and its wrap are purled together. Slip one, yarn over. This is the row I find the language makes more sense. Brioche purl and BRP, a lot of people just add another vowel. Instead of saying brioche purl, because it's a mouthful, they say burp. So burp is purling my stitch and its wrap together. Slip one, yarn over. My 3-word mantra on this row is burp, slip, and either yarn over or wrap. Burp, slip, and I lost my wrap. We can talk about that later. And wrap. Burp, slip, wrap. Now when we look back here, we're going to see single stitches that we've purled. I know there's a thing hanging down that's the other color, but up on the needle or the cable, single stitches in our working yarn, which is the rust, straight up and down stitches, a green stitch with a rust colored wrap, single stitch, stitch with its wrap. And it's the opposite of what I'm working. The colors are switching places based on what I'm doing. Burp, slip, wrap. Some things to keep in mind to keep you on track. Your burp should always be two different colors, a stitch and its wrap, and they should be alternating colors. The stitch, the straight up and down stitch, should be the same color as your working yarn. The slip should be a single stitch and it should be the other color, and the wrap there. So if you ever find yourself burping, purling, and you're not purling a stitch in its wrap, stop to see what happened. It could be the wrap got dropped, or it could be you're purling the wrong stitch. Burp. The slip stitch should never be the color you're holding in your hand. It should be a single stitch, and it should be the other color. So I slipped a green. I'm wrapping it with my rust. Burp, a stitch in its wrap. They are two different colors. Slip, wrap. Burp, slip, wrap. You get some slack off there. Whee, the yarns all want to get tangled. So my burp, brioche purling, a stitch and a wrap together. They are two different colors. I'm slipping a single stitch of the other color, and I'm wrapping my current yarn around it. Burp, a stitch and its wrap, two different colors. Slipping a single stitch of the other color, wrapping it with the current yarn. Another thing to keep track of is this is a purl row. So I'm brioche purling what is a purl stitch underneath me, even if it's hard to see with all the wraps. I'm slipping the knit stitch and I'm wrapping it. There's different ways to think about it. They all keep you on track. I am brioche purling a purl stitch I am slipping the knit stitch and I'm wrapping it. I am brioche purling a rust colored stitch with its green wrap with my rust colored yarn. I am slipping a knit stitch of the green and I'm wrapping it with my rust colored yarn. Brioche purl, slip, wrap. Brioche purl, slip, wrap. It's very important not to fall into the trap of knitting and purling because it's ribbing. This yarn, my color A yarn, only purls. Brioche purl, slip, wrap. Brioche purl, what is purled underneath me anyway, the purl stitch that's come up on the left hand here, slip my knit stitch, wrap. Brioche purl, the purl stitch and its wrap, slip the knit stitch, wrap your yarn around. Brioche purl, the stitch of the same color with its alternating color wrap, slip the single stitch of the other color, wrap. Brioche purl, burp, the stitch with its alternating color wrap, slip the stitch of the other color and wrap it. Burp, slip, wrap. Burp, slip, wrap. Burp. Now here is really important at the end of your row. I have a single stitch that I need to slip and I need to wrap. Now, since there's no purl stitch after it, you may be tempted to just yarn over and leave it hanging. But when you come back to this spot, there will be no wrap there. We need to keep, see, single rust colored stitches and then green stitches with wraps. To get the yarn over to become a wrap at the end of this row, wrap your yarn around it back to the front and leave it hanging in front. That way, when you go to start your next row, or your next half of the next row, and you pick up your green, your other color, whatever that may be, this wrap is going to stay there. It's very important at the end of a brioche purl row. Do the whole entire repeat, which is to slip your alternate color and wrap your yarn all the way around it to the front and leave it hanging in front. That will make the next row and everything else go much smoother. Thanks for joining us for the second half of round 2. The yarns are in the same place. I have totally set up all the stitches and wraps. At this point, with more rows, you will start to see what is going on. I'm going to do both parts of round 3 before we're done today. Again, I'm releasing these all in separate videos so you can watch them in more bite-sized chunks. But now that we've done a brioche purl row, we need to do a brioche knit row. We did the setup row. It was really close. But let's review what happens on the brioche knit row. That should be the next video in this playlist once it's published. If you're following along with the Brioche Knit-a-Long playlist. If you ever have trouble finding the videos in the order they're supposed to go in, please contact me and I'll try to get you a link to the next video. Again, thank you so much for watching this. If you haven't considered subscribing already, please consider subscribing. If you'd like to support the channel monetarily, it's not necessary, but always appreciated. You can become a member. You can give us a super thanks, like a tip, or you can go to patreon.com/sundragon and check out the levels there and the swag you can get once you've been a member for 3 months. As I always like to say, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.